Hey everybody, Mike here. Welcome to the Vox Podcast. So glad that you are tuning in today. We have a very special guest, guy by the name of Nate Collins, who has quickly become a friend and somebody who's doing some very, very interesting things in culture and in the kingdom. And so, Nate, hello, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Hey, Mike, good to be here.
Nate, I first heard. It was several months ago. It was towards the beginning, late spring, beginning of summer, about a conference that you were putting together called Revoice, and
That's right.
it started blowing up on my social media feeds a little bit. Can you tell us? And this is where I kind of discovered your work and what you were doing, and how great a conversation partner you would be. Tell us a little bit about what that conference was, who it was for, and what it was like.
Yeah. So the conference was a 3.5-day event. Actually, no, 2.5-day event. It was here in St. Louis. Memorial Presbyterian Church, a PCA church local here in St. Louis, hosted it. About 475 people attended, including about 50 volunteers.
And this was the first one, right?
The very first one. We sold out 5 weeks before
awesome.
The conference started. Had a waiting list, 100 people long. It's a lot of fun. And the goal of the conference was to support, encourage, and empower Christian gender and sexual minorities so they can flourish while adhering to historic Christian teaching about marriage and sexuality.
Okay, hold on.
That's packed in there, right?
Exactly. Holy cow. So let's go through that slowly. Mm-hmm. Put that in terms that like I would understand.
Sure. That's basically our mission statement. The target audience for Revoice is Christians who either experience some form of same-sex attraction, would potentially also identify as gay or lesbian, mm-hmm. or bisexual. But also we want people who experience gender dysphoria and other forms of just different ways that people experience their gender and sexuality. And mm-hmm. so, but also who adhere to a historic Christian teaching about gender, marriage, and sexuality. So
which is one man, one woman in a covenant of marriage.
Life. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So that engendered, pun intended, lots of criticism from all sorts of quarters.
Well, it's interesting. It not really all sorts of quarters.
Oh, okay.
We registered some people's radar who are the more progressive mindset. But a lot of us who are involved in this ministry have contacts and people that we know and consider to be friends in that, from that, I guess, area of North American evangelicalism, if you want to call it evangelicalism. Mm-hmm. But we actually got a lot of criticism from conservatives because of language we use on our website, because of ways that some of us talk about ourselves and self-identify, which was unfortunate because at the very end of the day, we believe the same things about sexual ethics and about what marriage is. We just have things we want to say and points we want to make about how Christianity can be livable for those of us who are gay or same-sex attracted or experience gender dysphoria. So that's in a nutshell what we were about. We wanted to give conservative LGBT, if you want to use that acronym, Christians a place where they could come and gather and be loved on and supported in their choices to make and continue to make good choices and live out a costly obedience.
What's your story? I mean, how did you arrive at a place where you're throwing that kind of conference?
Yeah. So I'm gay, and that's something I've been open about for about 12 years or so. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody, just about a lot of people's, stories sound pretty similar. You hear them say that they knew early on that they were different, mm-hmm. didn't quite know what that difference meant because, we're not always, we should be sexualized as little kids. But I remember mm-hmm. feeling as early as 6 years old that I was different. I was drawn to male beauty, for example. Mm-hmm. Nothing sexual about that at first. And then I became a teenager and the hormones flood the brain and those neural pathways get charged. That's when I realized that this was a sexual thing for me as well. And for me personally, I grew up in a third world country. My parents were missionaries, and I was a child of the 80s and early 90s. And so throw those two things together, and you basically get a context that's very sheltered.
Yeah.
And so,
did you ever talk to them about this, about what was happening?
Not until I came out to my dad when I was 19.
Okay.
One of the first people I came out to. My dad's always been one of my best friends, especially from my teenage years on. And so, yeah, I told him when I was 19. Went to Bible college in Chicago in 2000 when I was 20 years old. And actually, I'm married. That's another wrinkle, I guess.
Married to
a woman.
Oh, wow.
It's the only.
That is a wrinkle.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can go there later if you like. There are non-straight people who do find themselves wanting to pursue opposite sex marriage for whatever reasons, just whether it's just they'd always hoped and dreamed of one day having a family or a spouse. And a lot of times what ends up happening is you begin being drawn to the person and not necessarily the gender of that person. So for me, I met my wife first week in college and knew immediately that she was a wonderful person, a very godly person, beautiful, and someone that I could see myself pursuing in the future if I felt like God was leading me in that direction. And long story short, that's what ended up happening.
Oh my goodness! Now, when you're,
I want to make it clear, and this happens a lot, unfortunately. Just because marriage is what was God's calling for my life does not mean that it is in any way should be normative for non-straight people. Lots of non-straight people have zero desire to pursue opposite sex marriage. And for me, for my part, I can't fathom what it would be like to be intimate with any woman besides my wife. It just grosses me out to think about that. So I have a more or less latent, below the surface default, in a sense, if you want to use that word, gay orientation. But I also have what I just refer to as a parallel track of a one-woman orientation.
Got it. Yeah, yes.
Wife. And we've been married 14 years, have 3 kids, and our marriage looks different from some marriages, but also probably remarkably similar, just in the boring mundaneness of domestic life.
Absolutely. When you were a teenager in a missionary home, what was your faith doing while your body was doing all these other wonderful things?
Oh, man. My faith was very much an outward thing. It was very much I was performance driven, leader in the youth group, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was ignoring my orientation. It was out of sight, out of mind, put it as far behind me as I could, because I did not want to deal with it.
Yeah.
Didn't want to come to terms with it. At the same time, because my background looks so different from, I think, the way a lot of people are today, especially, are having to come to terms with their faith and their sexuality. One thing that did not happen for me, that I think a lot of people have to work through today, is what does this mean about my faith? What does my orientation mean about what I've been taught to believe about Christianity and about sexual ethics and about whether or not someone who has these desires can go to heaven?
Why do you think you were spared that?
I don't know, honestly. I never had a faith crisis, for example. And by faith crisis, I mean both kinds: questioning Christianity or also questioning the traditional sexual ethic. I think maybe one of the reasons that didn't happen back then is because there were no loud, compelling voices telling me that I could pursue a same-sex marriage and still be a Christian, still be even evangelical Christian. There's lots of different voices that are part of the conversation today that were not even on the radar back then.
Right.
So it's a very different ballgame, and I think that means that something like Revoice is even more necessary, because so many of the compelling pieces of the new narrative are precisely that you can revise and adopt a progressive sexual ethic and still be a Bible believing Christian. It's hard because I have friends that I consider to be dear friends who are in that camp, and
me too.
and so there's just a lot of tension that you have to work through to still have a loving and compassionate and humble, very humble stance towards people you disagree with. But
Right.
yeah.
So at 19, came out to your dad. 20, you're going to Bible college, right? Where was that?
I went to Moody Bible Institute in Chicago.
Okay, so for those of you that don't know, incredibly conservative.
Yes.
Yeah, they put the con in conservative, no question about it. And were you open at all about what was happening with you during those times?
Not early on, but honestly, I was there for 3 years, and beginning in the second year, I began opening up a whole lot more. And by the time I graduated, I would say about 50, 60 people knew. I was engaged to Sarah by the time we graduated as well. And then I've always just been kind of an open, transparent person about stuff. And it was one of those things that eventually, if I was getting to know you, eventually it was going to come out, just because I was going to make a reference to my experience as a non-straight person if it was relevant to something in conversation. And so, I mean, that's basically one reason why we decided to just be more public. Sarah and I did about 12 years ago. We were at a church that had a testimony series on Wednesday evenings, and I just shared my testimony. And at that point, I was in seminary at Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
And
which is another very conservative.
Yeah. And at that point, I became the only open non-straight person on campus, and that remained the same way for 12 years until I graduated. I was the only non-straight person who was open about their orientation on campus. I knew plenty of people who were not straight. None of them felt they could be transparent about that and be out, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them. It wasn't easy. So
you were pursuing your doctorate, master, was it bachelor's, master's, doctorate? Is that what the 12 years was?
No. So the 12 years was 6 years of MDiv, and then a year off, and then 7 years of PhD. But during that time, my wife got her MA in counseling. She got licensed, which is, I like to compare to another doctorate in a sense, more of a doctorate of ministry, maybe, just all the extra stuff you have to do too.
Yeah.
And we had 3 kids, so there's a lot of life we packed into.
Boy, no kidding.
That time.
Yeah.
We're glad to be through that season.
What was it like for you? If I can ask and be as specific or general as whatever you like, during the 12 years there. So you're in these, I would imagine, pretty robust theological conversations. Culture's exploding with conversation around this, and you're
that's 5 years.
Yeah, you're openly gay, openly identifying. Excuse me.
Well, no, that's
okay.
I never publicly identified as gay until after I graduated from Southern.
Okay.
I mean, that's part of the tension of existing in a really conservative space as a gay person, a non-straight person. So I mean, what that was like. On the one hand, you kind of have to learn to be resilient, have thick skin, but at the same time, that's a cost, you know. When I was looking at PhD programs after having been out at Southern for about 4 years, finishing up my MDiv, I was looking at PhD programs and thinking, where would I want to go where I could actually feel more open and more free to just talk about my experience in terms that were meaningful to me, instead of sort of the cookie cutter terms that I've been handed by my tradition. And at the end of the day, we decided to stay at Southern because I knew I wanted to impact the conversation that was being had in traditional evangelical theology. And I just figured a degree from a conservative seminary, one that actually matched my beliefs. I mean, my belief structures match up very closely with what schools like Southern and others teach and promote. So, at the time, it felt like a good decision. I mean, looking back, it definitely felt like we were making a much bigger sacrifice than we had an idea or that we knew we were making at the time. We would never have known that the conversation was going to accelerate so quickly, that a Obergefell was going to happen in 2015.
Yeah.
that people were going to be talking about how even experiencing same-sex attraction itself is sin. Like that's a thing that was not even on the radar when we first decided to stay at Southern, and now it's a thing. It's a thing. It's a belief people have for some reason, even though a lot of people that have initially promoted that, I don't understand how they can get that. Anyway, that's another conversation. It's in my book and elsewhere.
So what was your theological work around, particularly your doctorate? What were you, that makes sense that you would want credibility on the conservative side, so you stay at Southern. Mm-hmm. But what were you working on?
So I was initially going to write on a new covenant ethic of homosexuality and just jump right in there. And for a number of reasons, that actually ended up changing. I ended up writing a much drier, much interesting dissertation. I wrote about the social identity of virgins in 1 Corinthians 7 and their Jewish and Greco-Roman background.
All right. Now give it to me like we're just talking at Starbucks or something. Because I mean, that's awesome. That's a great title.
Yep, that is the title.
Oh, perfect. What were you seeking to show?
So what I wanted to do was do some really heavy academic heavy lifting in my dissertation that would prepare the conversation that I wanted to have about gender and sexuality today. That would lay the framework for that. And so in my dissertation, I talk about what gender is, what sexuality is. And then I zero in on the experience and the function, really, of the label virgin back in Jewish and Greco-Roman times. And what I do is I suggest a distinction between primary gender identity and secondary gender identity. Primary gender identity being intrinsically binary, because that's how God created gender originally to be binary, man and woman. So man and woman are one's primary gender identities, one of those. And then anytime a category is culturally meaningful enough in a particular society to further specify what kind of man or what kind of woman someone is, then labels will then crop up that sort of index those secondary gender identities. And so to break it down into what virgin means, the category of unmarried female or of marriageability, unmarried female sexuality was a big thing back then. Mm-hmm. It was important to know if a woman was a virgin or not, largely for patriarchal and inheritance reasons and things like that.
Yeah.
And so because of that, then labels like virgin meant a whole lot more back then than they do today. We think of 40-year-old virgin or true love waits, and that's the extent of our understanding of virginness.
Yeah.
But it meant a whole lot more back then. And so labels like virgin and widow, widow is another unmarried state involving a woman's sexuality. And so widow is another one. The word eunuch,
I think that's the one I'm familiar with.
Yeah. So I think that's another secondary gender identity that was, I guess, just in that culture that meant a whole lot more than today, what we would think when we hear the word eunuch.
Right.
So virgins and widows were always women. There were no male virgins. Anytime you see the word virgin where it refers to a man, it's the context makes it explicitly clear that this is a man being talked about. So that category is important back then, but I didn't really want to just end on 1 Corinthians 7 and what it means about virgins. My eyes are on the current conversation today and on what orientation means concerning one's gender. And so because orientation is a thing today, then labels crop up in our culture that index secondary gender identities based on some orientation, and labels being gay, lesbian, straight, bi, those sorts of things. And so for me, when I hear the word gay and when I use the word gay for myself, I'm using it in the sense of its secondary gender identity. It's purely my orientation. Purely refers to my orientation.
And if successful, that argument then validates, I think, something that your critics, at least on the conservative side, were very much upset by, which was a Christian identifying
identifying by their sin and making their sin patterns central to their the way their identity and their
Right.
how that pushing away the reality that someone's true identity, what's truest about them, is that they're a son or daughter of the King.
Right. Right. First Corinthians, that is what some of you were.
That's right.
The verse I always hear quoted there.
Yeah. So all of those words were all in 1 Corinthians 6. Those are all behavioral words of enduring patterns of like sinful behavior.
Right.
So when I say I'm gay, that does not have any. That says nothing, virtually nothing about my actual behavior that I'm doing. It just has to do with the orientation that I have.
Got it. So when people would come at you and say, "Well, okay, you shouldn't even use the identifier gay."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's your non-dissertation response? I
mean, there's a number of things. I talk about how people identify as straight all the time if you ask them why they identify as straight. But the problem is that there's nothing biblical or wonderful about indiscriminate just
straightness.
It's straightness, right?
Yeah.
The only biblical paradigm for orientation is what I call uni-heterosexuality, where you only are sexually attracted and drawn to one person of the opposite sex whom you're married to in a covenant relationship of marriage. So that is the only holy sexuality pattern of whole sexual expression that is sanctioned. And so straightness by itself isn't enough. I have a line in my book: straight people don't get partial credit for being straight. So if that's the case,
that's good.
Then that's one answer I give. I have a long I think the orientation itself is something that we need to think theologically about, instead of just taking our cues from culture and basically assuming, like everybody else does, that it's intrinsically sexual in nature. I don't know if that's too deep where you want to get into that.
No, yeah, absolutely. Because I'm sitting there going, oh, okay, hold on a second, because that's how I hear it.
Yeah, no, I think it's normal to think of it like that, because that's how everybody talks about it. But
right.
It's very Freudian, really. Freud was the one who made popular the idea that we're all basically intrinsically sexual beings. And he takes us in a lot of weird directions, but there's still directions that we tend to accommodate in our theology, at least in this conversation. Gay people are reduced to their sexuality instead of to anything else or other things that might be just as informative of what gayness is. And
what would some of those things be? Yeah, exactly.
One of those things, I think what I think is the central part of orientation is the perception and admiration of personal beauty. So it's not intrinsically sexual. It's just the pattern in which someone notices and admires and appreciates beauty. And when you see that emerge in a pattern of a particular sex, and I think that's what orientation is. I think that's much more. I think that is much more. It's easier to integrate that kind of an understanding about orientation into a robust biblical anthropology, theology of what it means to be human. We're created in the image of God to notice beauty in other image bearers because God is beautiful. And so there's nothing wrong with that. It's worthy to notice beauty and to praise God for the beauty of his creation, and including other image bearers. What happens inevitably, and this is one thing that critics will come back and say, is, we're sexual beings, though. So like we're always going to experience orientation as our sexuality. And I will say, yes, that's true. But there's a difference between saying that orientation is intrinsically sexual and saying that it's inevitably sexual. I think orientation is intrinsically perception of beauty, but because we're in bodies that are characterized by sexuality, then orientation will inevitably also be experienced as a sexual orientation.
So if somebody were to say, okay, it's not sinful, but it's disordered, it's not God's ideal.
Yep.
What would you say?
I would say, as long as we're specifying that the sexual aspects of orientation that we're talking about are what's disordered and not ideal, then yes, I would agree with that. Okay,
but what if they're arguing it's the orientation aspect of it?
Yeah, so there we're getting into, I think, mystery.
Okay.
We're getting into if I'm right, and if orientation is not intrinsically sexual, but it is something else, perception of beauty, then what we're asking is it possible this would have existed pre-fall?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It's like asking what would it be like to experience our sexuality in the new creation? I don't know.
Yeah.
I want to let mystery be where it is and not claim more than we can know.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that can result in is tension. But I think it's important because that's a very real tension that people have. They're up straight and they're trying to figure out how their faith can be meaningful in an ongoing experience that is not ideal in many ways.
Right.
We want to know, people like me want to know, how can we say no to sin, but how can we say yes to that which God has redeemed about my experience? And those are questions you just can't really have if you're just going to foreclose it all and say, nope, orientation is wrong and bad and sinful, and don't say gay because that means you're tying your new identity in Christ to a piece of your flesh and saying, no, I want to hold on to this. That's not what we were doing.
So what when you looked around, what was it that caused you to say, okay, we need a space to have some of these conversations? What prompted the Revoice Conference?
Wow. So something like Revoice doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Totally.
North American evangelical conversations about this topic have been all over the place, for the past 5 years, really. So since Exodus International shut down 5 years ago, May of 2013, there was no just large organization that people could look to for leadership. And so it's like judges. Everybody did what was right in their own eyes then. And you have all these conferences coming up about the topic. The very first ERLC conference, I think 2015 was on this subject. And ERLC is a Southern Baptist organization, but it was interesting to me that they couldn't find a single Southern Baptist to put on a stage who was non-straight. The 4 people that they put on the stage are outside the Southern Baptist Convention. So that's interesting. So conversations are happening. There's an organization or a blog called Spiritual Friendship.
Mm-hmm. Is that Wesley Hill?
Wesley Hill and Ron Belgau both founded that. And that blog has been, it's been doing double duty. It's been working really hard over the past 5-6 years to point to a robust theological but livable response or way to participate in the conversation while holding to traditional sexual beliefs. But one of the things that happened last year that was especially personal for me was this thing called the National Statement was released. We covered it, at least from our perspective. Really? Okay.
Well, we're just horribly offended.
Yes. So, number of problems with the National Statement. Personally, for me, the biggest 2 shortcomings were the language policing that ended up happening in the denial in Article 7. Yeah. It brought in this new language of self-conception, which was kind of strange because it didn't really have a history in this conversation. And so what's funny is a lot of the participants in the National Statement are nouthetic counselor, biblical counselor types. Psychology is bad. And so it sounds funny that they bring in this term from psychology, self-conception. And, now we like this. It's helpful. But it was hard because of that. What was really hard about it, though, was if a document can have a prideful posture, this one did. It was not humble at all in any way, because it did not acknowledge in any way how LGBT people have been harmed by Christians. And that's this massive part of the conversation that LGBT people are having themselves already. And that Christians demonstrated once more that we were oblivious to the pain and hurt that people have suffered at the hands of Christians. Well-meaning in many ways, some ways not well-meaning. I wouldn't even want to align myself with any. Anyway, so there was a lack of repentance, a lack of humility and awareness of that. And again, it had this language policing element to it that
was to directly go after the spiritual friendship movement.
It did. It totally did. People, I've talked to people who signed who somehow don't read it that way, but the vast majority of people see that as a feature, not a bug.
Yeah.
The national statement. And so my wife and I, we lived in the belly of the beast, so to speak, at Southern Seminary, which was in many ways spearheaded the national statement. Denny Burke is the president of Council for Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. He's a professor at the seminary there. He actually worked on it in conjunction with Albert Mohler and John Piper, the initial draft, before it got distributed to the people who eventually met up in Nashville to hammer out final details. So it was very much a Southern Seminary led thing, which really hurt for me as well, because I had spent my entire educational career at Southern Seminary being an openly non-straight person so that I can participate in these conversations and help point to a better way. Here we were with this document that was signed by people that we were friends with and couldn't really understand. And I think some tried to understand, but at the end of the day, I don't think many of them still understand what was so hurtful about the national statement. So about a month or so after that, my wife and I just sort of come to, and we get out of the fog of what was happening and look around, and we figuratively are looking at a battlefield full of wounded LGBT brothers and sisters who were hurt by that and are wondering, is there a place in evangelical Christianity for me? I used to think that I could exist and I could sort of carve out a little corner, but now I don't even know if that's the case. That's what I saw people saying and heard people saying. And so I thought, what can we do? And I was at a friend's house having bourbon and smokes. And because I graduated from Southern Seminary, enjoy the amber liquid of Kentucky.
That's very important to clarify.
Right. Anyway, but I was at a good friend's house, and he was like, Nate, just throw a conference. Call all your friends who are conference speakers because they're your friends, and throw a conference and say, hey, come love on a bunch of hurting LGBT souls who want to know whether or not Christianity is and evangelicalism is still going to work for them. Mm-hmm. And one thing led to another, and this conference happened, and it was an amazing success. It succeeded beyond any of our wildest dreams. Just in seeing people's lives impacted, hearing conversations. One of the most humbling things for me, just at the conference, is as the president, someone who started the thing with a lot of help, but a lot of people, over and over and over, people just came up to me saying, thank you. Like, thank you. And not even followed by thank you for what, but just thank you, because they didn't have words for what they were feeling thankful for. And I barely knew how to respond because I was just blown away by just how meaningful it was to so many people. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a wonderful thing.
So it was the blessing of space within the traditional ethic and the traditional belief structures of evangelical Christianity for those who would either experience some same-sex attraction or identify as these other things.
Yeah, we wanted to. There's always going to be some people in this conversation right now, the way it is going on right now, who are going to be suspicious of LGBT language and conservatives using that language, including some people who are conservative Christians and experience same-sex attraction. There's lots of people in that category who still themselves would not identify as gay or want to identify as lesbian or one of those labels. But we wanted to make the conference something that would be meaningful to them as well. We don't have an agenda for how people identify. That's not our goal. Our goal is not to have this mass conversion of people to all of a sudden identify as gay or
excuse me. Yeah.
We wanted just a place for people to exist and acknowledge that their orientation was real and to be supported in whatever decisions they wanted to make about how open to be about their orientation. It's exhausting to live as an openly gay person in conservative evangelical circles.
I can't imagine.
It's exhausting. Yeah. to do something like that without support, without being in a community that you can retreat to, in a sense, not because it's the truest form of Christianity or anything like that, but because it just feels safe. I think ideally those should always be our churches, but until the churches are safe enough for that, then it's just going to be in a space with other LGBT people.
What are the criticisms, if you received any, of the progressive side of the conversation that argues that, yeah, you can hold a progressive sexual ethic and still adhere to all the teachings of evangelical Christianity?
I think the one common criticism we received from progressives, and which I still don't understand, it was basically saying this is just ex-gay theology warmed over for a new era, which is not the case at all. And
by ex-gay, they mean
do all these things, go to this support group, learn to see these truths in your life and your past, and you will, once you come to terms with them, you'll experience a degree of healing, and that looks like getting married. So, like, that's the general ex-gay narrative that dominated evangelical conversations about this topic for 40 years.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's a number of things that we need to recognize there. Like, that's our history, whether we like it or not. Like, the ex-gay years are our history as North American evangelicals, people who are trying to think theologically about the issues of our day. And for that we need to own that as our history. And we need to recognize that has ramifications today. And so one of those ramifications is there's a lot of people who are hurt by that kind of narrative. And so they're going to look at something like Revoice, and that many did, and see a lot of similarities and say, well, this is just ex-gay theology formed over.
Yeah, because here you are, you're married, you have 3 kids, you know, you're not exactly a trailblazer in evangelical circles in terms of holding the ethic, right? Because you hold the traditional ethic.
Yeah.
And here you are, you're married. I mean, aren't you subtly reinforcing the...
Yeah, you know, it's really not many of them pointed to me being married per se. And honestly, like, I won't, like, if people ask, like, if churches ask me to come share my testimony, I just tell them no. I am not going to go and share my testimony at a church, because I know how many people will use it as a weapon against other people who, you know, are also non-straight, but to say, hey, look, this guy did it, I want to work for you.
Exactly.
So we just don't do that.
Yeah.
And thankfully that didn't get drug out a lot.
Good.
But they basically look at the sexual ethic itself and try and tie it to the errors of the past, of the ex-gay narrative. But at that point, I don't really know how the argument works, because there's just not really many points of contact besides just the belief in what marriage is and where sexual expression belongs.
Why theologically did you stick with the traditional view when there are decent academic arguments that allow people to hold otherwise?
So again, I never had a crisis of faith with that.
Yeah,
but I've read quite a bit, and I just don't find the arguments compelling. I've sometimes said in lectures and talks on the topic that even if the Bible didn't have any of the references to actual same-gender sexual behavior, that based off of Genesis 1 and 2 alone, we have enough to define what marriage is. The Genesis 1 and 2 are a charter of sorts for what the nuclear family looks like, for what family looks like, how children come about, and what the relationship is between sexuality and childbearing and marriage. Like, it's all tied together in a sense in Genesis 1 and 2. And so, I just don't find those arguments compelling. I mean, there's all kinds of strategies, right? Each text has its own genre and its own point that it's trying to make in that original context. And there's just been so many conflicting attempts to reinterpret those texts, and I don't find any of them compelling.
What would you say is the best, or not the best, but a great read arguing for the progressive interpretation on a popular level? And what's a good book on the conservative side of that same issue that you would recommend at a popular level?
Yeah, so the go-to popular level progressive book is Matthew Vine's A Gay Christian. Matthew Vine's basically takes a lot of James Brownson's book, Bible, Gender, Sexuality, and popularizes it.
Yeah, Brownson's book is the big daddy.
It's the big daddy in the progressive conversation, and then Matt Vine's. The best book that I would recommend before reading Matt Vine's or Brownson is Preston Sprinkle's book, People to be Loved.
Yeah.
The first half of that book is a very rigorous but very, very accessible examination of the different texts in the Bible that mention same-gender sexuality. And he's very committed to rethinking as much as possible about these texts and asking many points, is it true? Is it possible that progressives are right on this text?
Mm-hmm.
And so he deals very fairly with all the progressive arguments in the first half. And then the second half of the book is just great pastoral wisdom on what to do and how to think about the conversation today.
So how would you answer that in terms of, I would imagine there's some of our listeners hearing who are in automatically. They love it. Some probably are a little suspicious on the progressive side, going, I'm not so sure this is a healthy development. But I would imagine there are more than a few who are on the conservative side who aren't sure how to make room for somebody who comes into the church and says, listen, I am in a celibate partnership.
You just got a new term right now.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I follow somebody on Twitter who he identifies as gay. He has I don't know, friend, partner, something.
Yeah.
And they're physically celibate, but they're affectionate. They're physically affectionate.
Yep.
And he just writes a lot about how uncomfortable that makes churches.
Yeah. So the big question that you're asking is, how can Christians who are sympathetic to an extent to what we're trying to do, but just have this massive question mark about what that looks like?
Yes.
And
what advice do you have for them? Because I think the days of the Nashville Statement and the social justice statement, I think those are the last vestiges of a form of Christianity that's dying. I think that's a very true thing. I don't think we're going to be making statements like this in 10 years.
Well, yeah, and one of the things that was so incredible about Revoice, so historically, the past 10, 15 years, as the Spiritual Friendship Project has taken off.
Mm-hmm.
Starting out, I think, with Wesley Hill's book, Washed in Waiting, when that first came out in 2010.
Yeah.
That sort of signaled the emergence of a new kind of conversation about LGBT experience in conservative Christianity.
Right.
But one of the things that conversation was criticized for, or at least just an observation that was made, is it sounded really sad. Like washed but waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and lonely and tired and lonely again and isolated and attacked and under this, like it was a very, I mean, that was real. That was people's very real experience, because they were making some very brave decisions to be open about their orientation while staying in conservative spaces.
Right. With no sanctioned relief.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So one of the things that I really hope Revoice does, and I saw it and tasted it in the first conference we had, was a lot of joy. People, that room was packed with happy people. And the majority of the people who attended were non-straight. We had ways of, on the questionnaires that we asked the attendees to fill out to sort of read between the lines. But yeah, it was beautiful to see so much joy in that room. Joy as people were getting to know each other and telling their story and hearing how other people were making a costly obedience, living a costly obedience. And So I think, I honestly feel like that's the future, because that's what the gospel is. That's fruit of the gospel, joy, the ability to hope in something that you can't see yet, and still be happy about that. And so, yeah, I think documents like the national statement, like the social justice, those are all fear based, and there's no fear in the gospel.
Come on, preach, baby. Now, we're doing another one, right? In 2019.
Yep.
St. Louis.
St. Louis again, June 5th through 8th. Details forthcoming. We're really excited.
Where could people find you? Give me the name of your book again.
So the name of the book is All But Invisible. You can go to allbutinvisible.com. It's on Amazon. It was with Zondervan. It came out ironically about a month after the national statement.
Well done.
Yeah. So there's that. If you go to revoice.us, that's our website. And we just updated a little bit to get ready for the next one. But yeah, we're very, very actively planning, developing the organization right now. I've got a board of directors. We're in the process of getting 501c3 status. And
nice. Nate, I tell you what, man, I'm so grateful you take time to talk to me, because this does change a bit of the conversation. I mean, I think there are many of us who are trying to find ways through this that are compassionate, loving, gracious, that do rethink, some of the very excellent points that are being brought up, but aren't sure how to do a third way other than here's just the monolithic non-affirming category, and here's the monolithic affirming category.
Yep.
And there doesn't seem to be room, a lot of room, both academically and theologically, for people who are saying, I don't know that it's that simple.
Yeah.
I think there's nuance there that maybe we're not appreciating. So I really respect what you're doing. I am grateful for any voice that's coming along saying, hey, there's another way to think about this.
Yeah.
And so very grateful, man. Yeah. And I was, I follow my Twitter, the people I follow are just so all over the map, which is fantastic, right? I mean, you wouldn't put these people together in a room. And so I was eavesdropping on the Revoice conversation through at least a lot of criticism that was showing up from both the progressive and conservative sides. And I have a friend of mine, Tyler, who had gone and just said this was amazing. He's a pastor, same story. He was so incredibly blessed by it that it was, I really was excited to be able to talk a little bit. So thank you. Thank you, my friend. Yeah, I hope, there'll always be more to talk about in the future, but if you're ever wanting a conversation partner, I'm certainly always open. To our Vox listeners, boy, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being such an active, engaged community of people. We're so blessed to be a part of this and to have conversations like this. So as always, check out Nate's book and Nate's stuff online. For us, thank you for all the support you give us, and we're grateful to be a little part of your life. So until next time, my brothers and sisters, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance to you, and in these days, may he give you peace. So until next time, thanks.